I think I have a version of me that lives on stage, but I'm not a character. I'm fairly honest.
Yeah.
I think that is really what's kept me out of the big time for a long time, is that, like, I'm not an arena act, but if you kind of lock into what I'm doing, there's certain people. I usually say I don't have a demographic, I have a disposition.
It feels very accurate.
Yeah. I think these are most of the notes for the new special.
Is there a filing process for this, or is it just one on top of the other?
No, this is like, there's stacks of this type of stuff. Like, this is like, I'm trying to get it down to an hour, and I'm writing it on, the Ham Yard Hotel stationery in London. Like, it's like the week before I got to do an hour. I'm like, all right, So it's a nice hotel, though. But, like, these are things I would write down. Like, it just says, we are wired for duplicity. Our parents aren't who we think they are. Like, I don't know what that means to you, but it gets a good laugh, and there's a truth to it.
Yeah.
Right? And then I just say, gaslighting is parenting, So...
My kids would agree with that.
Right! This one says, when I hate myself, I hate everyone who has ever liked me. So, some of it makes it in, some of it doesn't, but it's all here.
Were you even in the beginning as personal on stage?
Not really. No, I mean, but oddly, I always thought, like I started watching myself a few years ago, like from '89, like doing Evening at the Improv and stuff. And I've watched them, and I'm like, the jokes are okay, but I am me. Mm-hmm. But, no, I'm not a grounded me. I'm not, someone who has control of my craft. Yeah. I'm not somebody who's comfortable up there.
Yeah.
I was terrified all the time. I tell people that for however long it takes, about 80% of your energy goes into pretending you're not afraid. That, for me, went on for years.
So how did you keep going on?
Because I'm a compulsive weirdo. I felt like I was chosen to do this. I don't know why. Because there was never a plan B. When I got out here, I was not emotionally stable. I had no sense of what it was like to be a grown-up. I was sleeping on the floor. It was all I wanted to do.
Do you feel like, even with all the other things you do, you're a stand-up comic at heart?
That's all, man. When I started doing the podcast, because, people were like, they didn't know me as a comic because I wasn't anybody. I've been, plugging away for 20, 30 years. As, I did TV spots and stuff. I couldn't sell tickets. Comics knew me. A few people knew me, but I was not a comedy star.
Right.
So by the time I started the podcast, which was a Hail Mary pass, I got this big audience, and I'm telling them I'm doing stand-up, and they'd start coming to these shows thinking, we should support Marc. Like, I know how to do this. I'm glad you like the interview show, but I've been doing this my whole life. So that was sort of an interesting adjustment and a weird thing to accept, that my fame or my, the skill set that really launched me was what you do.
Yeah.
Right? So, and there was a long time where, like, I really fought, to make sure that I had a monologue in the podcast, and it took me a long time to accept that, it's okay to be doing that. Whether people saw me as a comic or not, I was good at this other thing, and and something, some cosmic timing.
Well, what did that
on the map?
What did that do with your head in terms of how you saw yourself?
It was tricky because I didn't want to ever let go of being recognized as a comedian. So it was weird because most of the shows at the beginning were comics. It was really a comic-centric show, and it was me basically trying to apologize for being a bitter, monster to certain people. I think, there were two things happening in the first 100 or so episodes. It was me having, celebrities in to talk about my problems, and me apologizing to people for things that I was carrying, but they usually didn't even remember.
Yeah.
That's how I developed my style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you working something out there, or as you say, it's a Hail Mary pass, obviously job-wise, but.
Yeah, but there was no money in it, but it was just I needed to keep doing something because I was looking down the sort of the tunnel of being a kind of a B-room headliner, or a headliner that didn't have a following, and that's a hard life, and it's a sad life, and it's a life I know. I know a lot of people that live that life, and I'd like to think that it was a very dark time. I didn't really want to live that life, and I'm not sure I wanted to. I could have dealt with it, but sadly I probably would have. And I'm just grateful that it changed.
I want to talk about the HBO special because, there are two particular areas you deal with that are very personal. The first is your dad, who you've talked about in the past. And you're in a really unusual spot there because your dad has dementia.
Yeah.
And you've had a really complicated relationship with him.
Yeah.
How has that changed your relationship?
Well, the funny thing about my dad, is like it's complicated to the degree, at some point, I had the upper hand in a way. My dad is kind of he was always kind of a very self-centered, erratic guy, a little bipolar, and just not intimidating, but a little scary sometimes. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I stopped taking it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with comedy. Is that like my father, like I tell a story about how, when I was in high school and he was depressed, when he had paralyzing depression, my mother would say, why don't you go up and make your father laugh? You're the only one that can, So it was sort of like, ooh, tough crowd, I tell you. But that dynamic never went away. I can really bust on my dad to his face in a very brutal way, and he just kills him. He loves it. He loves it. But yeah, it's difficult and it's sad, and and I think that not unlike other stand-ups or people in general, I can find a way to talk about it that is funny and heartbreaking. But you do keep a certain comedy disarms things, and it protects you. There's a defensive-ness involved in it, and I think it helps me survive. And I can let feelings in, and I do, and I know where this is leading, but it's okay right now.
Yeah. To what degree is making comedy out of it therapeutic?
I think it's therapeutic, but there's also an edge of cruelty to it. Yeah. So that's something you have to accept. It's like, this stuff is, it feels a little wrong to be talking about it like I'm talking about it. But the truth of the matter is, like, 75% of the people in this country are going to deal with this. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have some operating sense of humor to sort of counter the horror of it, it's going to be a difficult run.
So I want to talk about Lynn, because you've been through a whole process with that started right after she died.
Yeah.
When you immediately went onto a podcast. And now you're taking to the point of putting that in your comedy, and you make light of just that process itself, which is really interesting. Of
tragedy and grief and losing somebody.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you get to that point, in terms of putting in material and deciding that you can be funny about it.
That was always part of what I did as a comic.
Right.
And as I'm talking to you, I start to realize that this other stuff, the personal stuff, is really the same. That I'm going, to a darker place, and I'm taking certain chances, emotional chances, and also risks around how I'm framing things that seem either taboo or not talked about. Talking about grief is just something people don't do because it's frightening, and they don't. There's a lot of reasons. It's complicated, and look, man, it was devastating, and I'd never experienced anything that, like in dealing with my father, like her death tragically and quickly and unexplainably, it just shattered, everything in me emotionally.
Yeah.
Like any sort of control you think you have over life, any sort of plans you think you have for the future, anything, all those things that sort of like, no, that won't happen.
Yeah.
And dealing with those feelings and choosing to do the podcast 2 days after she passed away, only because that's what we did, is that I wasn't looking for anything. And I really have thought this through. I thought that if I go on the mics in this state, because people knew she passed, that it would speak to something that's never spoken to. Yeah. Those feelings that I was having are usually had alone or with close family or whatever.
You could have decided though not to do it.
Yeah, my producer was like, we don't have to ever do a podcast again.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
Yeah,
but I thought it would help people to go on in that state, and it was awful, and I haven't listened to it.
Do you think you would?
No, it's sad, man. It was sad. And that's the thing. It's like, if I talk about it for a while, it's right there. Grief is like there's a while there where you can't control it, and you're just like, crying and you just can't stop it. and you don't even understand it. You don't even know what you're feeling, but it's like happening.
Well, most of all, you just need to feel it.
Yeah, but there's like, you're going to. It's like there's no need involved.
Yeah.
Because like my instinct would be like, I gotta stop this.
Yeah.
How am I gonna, you know? But there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
And it's always sort of right there. You know, if I talk about it, it's just so awful. But in terms of talking about it comedically, is that I knew it would evolve. It was just sad sometimes, and I would cry on stage.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to get out of it, but because of how I told you I write, I knew eventually I would have to make it funny, because crying's not that entertaining. so it kind of evolved like that. And I just thought, my belief was, there's a couple things happening, was that like I figured that everyone knew that I'd experienced this loss because it was a public thing.
Yeah.
And there was one thing I didn't want, and I think, and I don't know that I've ever thought about this until now, which is how I am, it happens out loud, was that I didn't want to be seen as a victim, because, she was the victim.
Yeah.
So I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. So my way of dealing with that was, is to be funny, but not to avoid it, right?
Interesting.
It is kind of interesting. I don't know if I ever really thought of that before.
Do you think you talked about it because you felt like you kind of had to talk about it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people are used to you talking about your life.
Right. But also I had to respect her.
Why was that relationship so special to you? Because you said you never felt anything like that before.
The reason it was so powerful is like I was terrified to give into it.
Why?
I don't know. It's just like because I'm emotionally not good, not right. But to answer your question, there's just nobody really like that person. Nobody like Lynn Shelton, and she actually, she just made me believe in myself.
Yeah. That's a big thing.
For me, it is.
How are you now?
I mean, I'm okay because I don't really, let myself go where I just went, 30 seconds ago. I don't mind opening up, like totally up there. I more so than in my life.
Why is that, do you think?
Because in some ways it's less risky.
Do you need it?
Probably. And I've never been happier doing it, and I don't think I've ever been better doing it. So there's a part of me that's sort of like, I think I'm finally enjoying this.